Let's take you here now. Violent protests in South Africa have brought the spotlight on police response to public demonstrations, highlighting serious concerns when it comes to the level of violence in the country. Gauteng police have confirmed that 4 people have died in the ongoing violent protests in Tembisa over exorbitant electricity and water rates. MEC for Human Settlements, Urban Planning and CoGTA in Gauteng, Lebogang Maile, has visited, in fact, Tembisa this morning in an attempt to determine the underlying reasons for the protests. Now let's discuss this further. We are joined via Zoom by Godfrey Mulaudzi, Justice and Violence Prevention Researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. Godfrey, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for making time to speak to us. Of course, again, this conversation brings us to a very concerning matter. I mean, we've seen violent protests in this country, but this latest protest in Tembisa again sparking fears that we are going to be seeing more and more of these violent protests as South Africans ask for better service delivery.
Good afternoon, Unat and the viewers. Indeed, I think it is a cause of concern, the level of violence within that accompanies the protests by our communities. But I think let's look at the Tembisa and give it a bit of context. This has started as just a peaceful protest, I think, around, if you look at the timeline, from the 20th of July, right? And people of Tembisa calling collectively, of course, exercising their right to protest within the Constitution, collectively, calling on the leadership of the city of Ekurhuleni to address their demands on the higher rate of electricity that they can't be able to cope with. That is a legitimate concern. And I think we know that you would have seen people of Soweto as well making the same demands, peaceful, going to meet with the executive mayor of Johannesburg. So there is a legitimate concern that people of Tembisa are raising. But is there anything that justify the violence? No. Of course, we need to advise, we need to make a call for people of Tembisa to always be on the side of the rule of the law. We do not promote violence. So there could be many ways they could use to put pressure on the city to address their demands. So I think that we indeed, of course, want to condemn violence. But of course, we need to say the leadership of the constituency of Tembisa, the leadership of the city of Ekurhuleni needs to take this legitimate concern very seriously, because the situation will escalate and would even go to other communities as well.
And I mean, when you're talking about the fact that there is legitimate reason for these protesters to go onto the streets and, you know, demand what is due to them, what has been promised to them. And we're talking here about basic service delivery. And of course, what we've seen recently are those high costs that South Africans just cannot, you know, afford fuel. They cannot afford these high food prices, whilst we know what, you know, the reasons behind these are. But where it talks to the leadership, you know, we've just played that clip earlier on with the MEC Maile saying that, of course, calm needs to be restored, but also that parties, because we know that, you know, particular municipality is run by a multi-party system, need to come together as leaders, as well as community leaders, to come with tangible solutions. But this is painstakingly slow.
It is very slow, and I think, again, it reflects the gap between the local leadership from the city to the local ward councillors or proportionally representative councillors in that community and the city itself, because the people of Tembisa have always been calling for dialogue with the executive mayor, which never happened, and it led to the situation escalating and unfortunately resulting to the loss of life of people, destruction of infrastructure. And this is indeed, I think, a very, very various, you know, a vote of no confidence, if I may put it that way, to the leadership of that the metro. The socio-economic conditions in the country, worldwide as well. I mean, the cost of living is too high. People are struggling to make ends meet as is now. And you need to have leadership that shows some degree of empathy towards their constituencies. And we don't see that happening in these instances. Rather, we see politicians, you know, exchanging blames back and forth. And I think, you know, the issues that people are now raising, the politicians are raising, of third forces, of political people being involved, these are issues that are neither here nor there, because the issues that affect communities, political parties also do enjoy the rights. If you look at the Constitution, the Section 17 speaks about everyone has the right to protest, whether be it a politician, be it a group of civil society organizations, they do enjoy that right in the Constitution to protest and express their concern that they have with their leaders. And so I think that what is so important now, I think we need leadership from the executive mayor, the PR councillors, the local ward councillors that are always in constant consultations with their community, so that they are having a full, a full understanding, to a full appreciation of what are the conditions that people are facing in the ground. And I had somehow people being called that they are criminals. You can't, as a leader, be able to reach that point where you call people criminals who are exercising their constitutional right. I think that speaks also to an unjustifiable repression of that right for them to protest.
Godfrey, as we wrap this conversation, of course, we know that 4 people have died during those protests. Talk to us very quickly. Police, again, the spotlight being on how they respond to public demonstrations. How would you say they are handling this particular matter as it stands?
It is indeed unjustifiable. I think that there could have been less restrictive means they could have used because people have the right to assemble, to gather, to protest, to present petitions, peacefully so. But there is no any other way that could justify police, whoever that could have used the ammunition to kill protesters. So I think that speaks to the brutal repression of people when they want to exercise their constitutional right. That speaks to the unjustifiable limitation of that right as well. So I think that is uncalled for. There needs to be responsibility. People need to start taking responsibility from the executive mayor to the level of the metropolis within the city of Ekurhuleni.
Godfrey Mulaudzi, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for this afternoon. Godfrey is the Justice and Violence Prevention Researcher at the Institute for Security Studies.